Rejoice, episode 170, 170, Olives and Opportunity. Hello, I'm Frank Delaney. We're in the butcher's shop with Mr. Leopold Bloom as he buys what he needs for his breakfast and pays Mr. Douglas, the butcher. This week, we see a little more of the advertising side of Mr. Bloom, and here we go. This week's text, starting with him paying for his breakfast kidney. Here it is. 3p, please. His hand accepted the moist, tender gland and slid it into a side pocket. Then it fetched up 3 coins from his trousers pocket and laid them on the rubber prickles. They were read quickly and quickly slid disc by disc into the till. Thank you, sir. Another time? A speck of eager fire from Fox eyes thanked him. He withdrew his gaze after an instant. Oh, better not. Another time. Good morning, he said, moving away. Good morning, sir. No sign. Gone. What matter? He walked back along Dorset Street, reading gravely. Agendat Netheim, Planters' Company, to purchase waste sandy tracts from Turkish government and plant with eucalyptus trees, excellent for shade, fuel and construction, orange groves and immense melon fields north of Jaffa. You pay 80 marks and they plant a dunam of land for you with olives, oranges, almonds or citrons. Olives cheaper. Oranges need artificial irrigation. Every year you get a sending of the crop. Your name entered for life as owner in the book of the Union. You can pay 10 down and the balance in yearly installments. Bleibtreustrasse 34, Berlin W15. Nothing doing. Still an idea behind it. That's Mr. Bloom, walking back along Dorset Street, just north of the centre of Dublin, back to his home in Eccles Street on a sunny Thursday morning in June 1904. To think that a kidney cost only 3p. Hang on, though. That's $2-ish in today's money, if you could even get a kidney in the United States. Just under £1 or so in English pounds. So maybe not that different. Use a multiplier of what? Maybe 30 or so. So not bad. Now the next 3 sentences are Joyce's narration, and listen to the quality of description. Listen to this. His hand accepted the moist, tender gland, which is wrapped, of course, and slid it into a side pocket. Then it, the same hand, fetched up 3 coins from his trousers pocket and laid them on the rubber prickles. They were read quickly, and quickly slid disc by disc into the till. The kidney is the moist, tender gland. Not, I suppose, entirely accurate medically. And the butcher had on his counter a little tray of rubber prickles for coins, which, of course, is what he would mostly have been handling by way of receiving payment. Mr. Bloom puts the coins down there, and what happens? They were read quickly. I love that. The butcher looked at them and said, yes, that's the right amount, 3p, and quickly slid, disc by disc, coin by coin, into the till. Isn't that lovely? Can you come up with a more vivid way of describing that? The next line is Mr. Lugatz's, thank you, sir, another time. That's to say, please come back, Mr. Bloom. Returning custom is a cornerstone of trade. And Mr. Lugatz's little sting of salesmanship is confirmed in the next sentence. A speck of eager fire from Fox eyes thanked him. The butcher, not a fool, is impressing his customer with eye contact. And now look what happens after the speck of eager fire. It stimulates Mr. Bloom to think about selling an ad. He wonders if he should hit up the butcher for a newspaper advertisement, which, after all, is what Mr. Bloom sells. But the butcher withdrew his gaze after an instant, and Mr. Bloom concludes, "No, better not, another time." So he'll come back to him, and he begins to leave the butcher shop. "Good morning," he said, moving away, and the butcher answers, "Good morning, sir. This is a well-trained butcher, and also an immigrant, so of course he's minding his manners." Now we have next 3 little sentences, thoughts from Mr. Bloom. "No sign. Gone. Oh, what matter?" He has stepped out into the street, looks around for the domestic servant from the house next door to him. She was in the shop ahead of him, and he had been looking forward to walking home behind her swinging hips. But there's no sign of her. She's gone, and he shrugs it off. Oh, what matter? And what did he do after his shrug? He walked back along Dorset Street, reading gravely. And what was he reading? The wrapping paper that the butcher has used, torn up newspapers. And there's an advertisement, we had this reference some weeks ago, for a Middle East commercial opportunity. The advertiser is named Agendath, or Agendath, Netaim, Netaim, a planter's company. And there was actually, indeed, such a company offering such opportunities. How was it intended to work? They were going to, and I quote, "to purchase waste sandy tracts from the Turkish government and plant with eucalyptus trees." Simple enough. Now here come the unique selling points, or USPs as we call them today. Quoting from the advertisement, "excellent for shade, fuel and construction. Orange groves and immense melon fields north of Jaffa." That's Haifa in today's terms. So how does it work? You pay 80 marks, and they plant a dunam of land for you with olives, oranges, almonds, or citrons. And Mr. Bloom reflects from the ad, sees it there. Olives cheaper. Oranges need artificial irrigation. A dunam, by the way, is about a quarter of an acre. It's a Hebrew word. It's in Turkish as well. So in effect, the Turkish government was helping the 19th century Zionist movement to set up Jewish colonies in Palestine. This was 44 years, remember, before 1948. And what do you get for your money in this well-explained venture? Every year you get a sending of the crop, your name entered for life as owner in the book of the union of the group of people. How do you pay for it? Can pay 10 down and the balance in yearly installments. Send it to Bleibtreustrasse 34, Berlin W15. 80 German marks in 1904. How much was that worth? Very difficult to calculate, because after World War I, Germany was part of the Treaty of Versailles, and therefore was obliged to make reparation payments to various enemy allied countries. And to try and get hold of their money somehow, the Germans devalued the mark like crazy, and they more or less precipitated the internal economic crisis that got Hitler his foot in the door. But European currency kept a lot of parities, and a mark was like an English shilling, and by my complex math, you could call the deal, what, 4 English pounds per quarter acre, $6.5 US, and again the multiplier called 30. Not bad. By the way, Bleibtreustrasse, that was the real address of the Palestine Land Development Company. Isn't it interesting that it was in Berlin, given all the horror that was yet to come, all the dreadful horrors of World War II? So let me look back. Where are we? Mr. Bloom has read the advertisement, and he thinks it's not for him. Nothing doing, he thinks. But he doesn't condemn it. Still, an idea behind it. Mr. Bloom speculating on buying a quarter acre of olive or orange grove in Palestine. And that's this week's podcast. Back next week. In the meantime, let me remind you, read Joyce, Exploring the World of Ulysses, is now an ebook. It consists of the first dozen or so of these podcasts transcribed, and from ebook sources, such as Amazon, it costs a mere $3.99. See you next week. Rejoice, episode 171, Perfect Oranges. Hello, I'm Frank Delaney. Mr. Bloom has left the butcher's shop, having secured the kidney, that he will fry for breakfast. He's ambling back to his house on the sunny June Thursday morning in 1904, reading the advertisement for land in Palestine. The ad is in the newspaper that the butcher has used to wrap the meat. In this next passage of text, we are firmly in Mr. Bloom's thoughts, observations, and reminiscences triggered by the illustration in the advertisement. And here's the text. He looked at the cattle, blurred in silver heat. Silver-powdered olive trees, quiet long days, pruning, ripening. Olives are packed in jars, eh? I have a few left from Andrews. Molly, spitting them out, knows the taste of them now. Oranges in tissue paper, packed in crates. Citrons, too. Wonder is poor Citron still in St. Kevin's Parade. And Mastiansky with the old cither. Pleasant evenings we had then. Molly in Citron's basket chair. Nice to hold, cool, waxen fruit, hold in the hand, lift it to the nostrils and smell the perfume. Like that heavy, sweet, wild perfume. All was the same, year after year. They fetched high prices too, Moisel told me. Arbutus Place, Pleasant Street, pleasant old times. Must be without a flaw, he said. Coming all that way, Spain, Gibraltar, Mediterranean, the Levant. Crates lined up on the quayside at Jaffa, chap taking them off in a book, navvies handing them barefoot in soiled dungarees. End of quote. There is, as we learned a few episodes back, a depiction of cattle grazing the quiet valleys of the Middle East in this newspaper ad. And olive trees, lovely description, and if you've ever stood in an olive grove, you'll immediately recognize the description. Silver powdered. It's that combination of drab green and silver grey that the olive leaves have. Quiet long days, pruning, ripening. Mr. Bloom is immersed in a combination of fact and fantasy, thinking that he would have quiet long days, pruning, ripening. And yes, that is also what happens in life to the fruits of the Middle East. And he continues the thoughts of olive groves, tracking the fruits from the tree to the table. Olives are packed in jars, eh? They are. I have a few left from Andrews, a Dublin grocery. The ubiquitous tea, wine and spirit merchant sign was over their door in Dame Street. I was enchanted by that sign, those words, when I was a child. Molly spitting them out and knows the taste of them now. And he remembers his wife, who hadn't known, obviously, what olives tasted like. He remembers her spitting out the pips. Now Mr. Bloom moves on to the consideration of other exotic fruit from Palestine. Oranges in tissue paper, packed in crates. Citrons, too. And the fact that the orange is a citrus fruit, and yes, I remember them, too, coming in boxes packed with tissue paper. That triggers for Mr. Bloom a memory of somebody he used to know. The more ruthless, therefore the less imaginative teachers of creative writing, who have laid down the rules and stultifying conventions that strangle most modern novels, would be thrilled with one aspect of Ulysses. James Joyce gave Leopold Bloom and his other main characters big, long, and deep backstory, to use the creative writing school jargon. Well, here comes an early blast of that deep backstory. We already know that Molly Bloom has a connection to Gibraltar. But just like the Joyce family, Mr. Bloom has had a number of different Dublin addresses, and here we begin to encounter them. He thinks, wonder is poor Citron still in St. Kevin's Parade? And Mastiansky with the old cither. Pleasant evenings we had then, Molly and Citron's basket chair. St. Kevin's Parade runs off Clanbrassil Street and Heytesbury Street in Dublin. I used to work around the corner at the Meath Hospital. And Joyce gave the Bloom family an address in Lombard Street, nearby. I'm trying to see in my mind's eye. Oh yes, I know where Lombard Street is now, and St. Kevin's Parade is just off it. And a neighbour whose name he had taken directly from the pages of the Dublin Directory for 1904, Israel Citron. The next door to Citron real-life address is that of Mastiansky, a grocer who played the zither, to the evening delight of Mr. Bloom and his young wife Molly. Pleasant evenings we had then. Molly in Citron's basket chair. The oranges are the trigger. And now Mr. Bloom recalls the actual fruit. Nice to hold, cool, waxen fruit. Hold in the hand, lift it to the nostrils, and smell the perfume. I like that, like that. Heavy, sweet, wild perfume, always the same, year after year. So he loves the smell, as indeed he seems to love all heavy, sweet, wild perfume. The word perfume makes frequent appearances in Ulysses. 25 times in all Joyce uses the word, which is a lot for him. But there are 33 usages of the word wild, and most of those have some erotic connection. So here we have Mr. Bloom visiting a memory that has to do with sensuality, and note that Joyce uses the sense of smell, a sense that will recur again and again and again in the novel, because Ulysses is, after all, constructed in substantial part from his memory, and smell, as we know, is one of the great memory triggers. All that sensuality coming from a newspaper advertisement that mentions oranges. Interesting reference coming up now. Bloom is thinking, they fetch high prices too, Moisel told me. Arbutus Place, Pleasant Street, pleasant old times. This is all pretty close to an area of Dublin called Mount Pleasant, and Joyce uses the word pleasant, the name of a street, to convey feeling. Israel Citron, Mr. Mastiansky, and Mr. Moisel did indeed all live where Joyce has them in the novel. They were Jews. Mr. Citron and Mr. Mastiansky lived in St. Kevin's Parade, and Mr. Moisel lived near them in Arbutus Place. And of course Mr. Bloom was Jewish, and his father, as we shall discover, had been in that part of Dublin too. Talk about deep backstory. And he's right. Oranges did fetch high prices. There was a time when they were a great luxury. Cardinal Wolsey used to walk, it is said, through the streets of smelly London, holding an orange to his nose to mitigate the stink from the open sewers. By the way, don't you love the little sting of characterization here? Mr. Bloom thinks, always the same, year after year. The oranges don't change, showing how Mr. Bloom observes when something is consistent. He likes consistency. Now here's the interesting reference I mentioned. Well, aren't they all? Quote from Mr. Bloom's thoughts. Must be without a flaw, he said. That's Mr. Bloom's memory of something Mr. Moisel said to him, that oranges must be flawless. Later, much later on this long Thursday, Mr. Bloom will observe in his own mirror in his own house the books on his shelves, and he will think about cataloguing them, and he will begin to list them, and among them he will name a sewn pamphlet, a little stitched-together pamphlet, on the philosophy of the Talmud, one of the cornerstones of Judaism. In the Hebrew observance of harvest festivals, according to Talmudic law, the oranges that are included in the celebration must be, in some versions of the philosophy, must be without a flaw. A kind of same but not quite the same principle as keeping kosher. And then Mr. Bloom, thinking of this required flawlessness, allows his mind once again to wander to problems, but also to sunnier climes and exotic imaginings. Coming all that way, how can they not get damaged, is what he's thinking. And he mentions the countries: Spain, Gibraltar, there's money again, Mediterranean, the Levant, crates lined up on the quayside at Jaffa, chap thinking them off at a book, navvies handling them barefoot in soiled dungarees. He's there, in his mind. And so are we. Navvy's interesting, by the way. And Joyce is right to locate it beside water. As a child, the men working the roads used to be called navvies, and heavy workers, heavy labourers are often called navvies. But a navvy actually was a navigator. He was a man who helped dig canals. And it's an 18th century word, navigator, and that's where navvy comes from. That's all for this week. Don't forget, read Joyce, Exploring the World of Ulysses, an ebook. I transcribed the first dozen or so of these podcasts. And on the internet, from the likes of Amazon, it costs a mere $3.99. Cheap at the price. I'm not very good at the selling thing, am I? No, I'm not. I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Rejoice, episode 172, Hunchbacks and Hags. Hello, I'm Frank Delaney. As we come to the end of September 2013, we are still in Ulysses, in June 1904, and so we shall be for many years to come. We're in Chapter 4, named Calypso by Joyce in the post hoc schema of chapter names that he dreamed up under pressure from a journalist. The word means to hide, to keep secret. And in Homer's Odyssey, the nymph Calypso hid Odysseus away until he complained to the gods that he wanted to go home to his wife. And much though I'd like there to be, I can find no copper-fastened connection between the nymph of Grecian myth and the delightful West Indian folk song form, the Calypso. So, where are we? Yes, Mr. Bloom is on his way back from the butcher's early morning with a kidney in his pocket to fry for breakfast, and he's been reminiscing about a man named Citron, Citron, a neighbour of his in a different part of Dublin. And this has all been triggered by a newspaper advertisement for land speculation in Palestine, where you can grow citrus fruit. Here's this week's chunk of text. It's full of stuff. Mr. Bloom's thoughts first. There's what you call him out of... how do you... Doesn't see. Chap, just as loot, bit of a bore. His back is like that Norwegian captain's. Wonder if I'll meet him today. Watering cart. To provoke the rain. On earth as it is in heaven. A cloud began to cover the sun slowly, wholly, grey, far. No, not like that. A barren land. Bare waste. Volcanic lake, the Dead Sea, no fish, weedless, sunk deep in the earth. No wind could lift those waves. Grey, metal, poisonous, foggy waters. Brimstone, they call it, raining down. The cities of the plain, Sodom, Gomorrah, Edom, all dead names. A dead sea and a dead land, grey and old now. It bore the oldest, the first race. A bent hag crossed from Cassidy's, clutching a naggin bottle by the neck. The oldest people wandered far away, all over the earth, captivity to captivity, multiplying, dying, being born everywhere. It lay there now it could bear no more, dead, an old woman's, the grey, sunken cunt of the world. Desolation. Mr. Bloom's thoughts. That's where we are. And we see a mood change. There's what you call him out of... He sees somebody whose name won't spring to mind. This is the first of a series of personages we'll encounter in Ulysses who are never named or explained. Bear with me, though. Next two thoughts. How do you... Doesn't see. Mr. Bloom is about to greet the man, but the man doesn't see him, or refuses to. It won't be the first snub, if it was a snub, that Mr. Bloom experiences this long June Thursday. Mr. Bloom tells us a little of who the man is. Chap, just to salute. Bit of a bore. He knows the fellow from seeing him around, but they're not really acquainted. He knows, however, that the fellow is boring. Next thought. His back is like that Norwegian captain's. And now we know a little more. There used to be a Norwegian sea captain lurching around Dublin, a hunchback. He was the subject of a joke told by Joyce's godfather to Joyce's father. The sea captain complained to a Dublin tailor that the suit he ordered didn't fit him, and told the tailor, "You're useless at sewing." Whereupon the sailor told the hunchback Norwegian sea captain that "you're useless to try and fit." It's not much of a joke, really, but they used to fall about laughing at it. So after his thought, his back is like that Norwegian captain's. Mr. Bloom wonders, I wonder if I'll meet him today. Next, Mr. Bloom sees a cart watering the streets to keep down the dust because there's been a dry spell. watering cart to provoke the rain on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, here's an inversion of sorts. It's the will of the watering cart on earth that will trigger the will of heaven, instead of done on earth as it is in heaven, instead of heaven leading earth. Now we see another aspect of Joyce's literary thinking. We've touched on it before, and it's terrific. It shows how he thought his way through ideas of unification, devices for holding the novel together. Here's the Joyce's narration piece in Mr. Bloom's passage of thoughts. A cloud began to cover the sun slowly, wholly, grey, far. We've already seen this cloud. I mentioned it at some length in podcast number 21. I looked it up and quoted its appearance in the opening chapter. A cloud began to cover the sun, slowly, wholly, shadowing the bay in deeper green. This is the same cloud that Stephen saw in chapter 1 over on the far side of the city, and now it has travelled north several miles to where Mr. Bloom is. Here, Joyce uses it interestingly. Earlier, it was associated with the colour green, the colour of jealousy, and Mulligan is jealous of Stephen. Now, he introduces grey, depression. A cloud began to cover the sun slowly, wholly, grey, far. And then he follows it with an isolated thought. No, not like that. And that thought reflects back to the little detail of Talmudic law on perfect oranges that we had last week. And Mr. Bloom, as we shall discover, is no longer as Jewish as his old Jewish neighbours. He's not like that anymore. Is that what's depressing him? And listen to the triggered thoughts of the land that the Zionists, to whom he doesn't belong, are offering. A barren land, bare waste, volcanic lake, the Dead Sea. No fish, weedless, sunk deep in the earth. No wind could lift those waves, grey metal, poisonous, foggy waters. Brimstone, they called it, raining down. The cities of the plain, Sodom, Gomorrah, Edom, all dead names. A dead sea and a dead land, grey and old. Old now, it bore the oldest, the first race. He has taken the sunny advertisement for orange groves and olive trees in Palestine, and he's turned it dark. No, Mr. Bloom thinks of its desert aspect, believes, mistakenly, that the Dead Sea is a volcano filled with water. That's what people used to think it was. And by the way, if you've ever bathed in the Dead Sea, you'll know that Joyce got it absolutely right. It's a most unpleasant experience. As Mr. Bloom reflects, no fish, weedless, no weeds, sunk deep in the earth. Don't know how deep it is. No wind, he thinks, could lift those waves, grey metal, poisonous, foggy waters. Yep, that is spot on. I've been in the Dead Sea and I didn't like it one bit. And then Mr. Bloom reflects that the region was made ashen and arid by God's destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, down on which he rained fire and brimstone. Brimstone's horrible, actually. I think we had it in the science class at school. It's a yellow stone that catches fire and it gives off a lousy, toxic smell. It's kind of a bit like phosphorus. I wonder if they're one and the same thing. Anyway, Mr. Bloom's thought presses on. Brimstone, they called it, raining down, the cities of the plain. Sodom, Gomorrah, Edom, all dead names, a dead sea and a dead land, grey and old. There wasn't, by the way, a city named Edom. He's confusing it, Joyce says, with the area of Siddim, or the tribe named Edomites, Edom. This, I'm sure, is another of Joyce's keep the professors busy tricks. All dead names, thinks Mr. Bloom, a dead sea and a dead land, grey and old. Old now. It bore the oldest, the first race. After the flood, there was Noah and his ark. And he and his family and his animals, they were all that was left. A fresh start, a new leaf in this land that became Israel. Old now, it bore the oldest, the first race. Let's run through the rest of this week's text. A bent hag crossed from Cassidy's, clutching a naggin bottle by the neck. An old woman has been in the bar across the street, and she's either bought or had filled a little quarter of a pint bottle of booze. Yeah, it's about a naggin is about a quarter of a pint. Bloom reflects again on the Jews and Noah, the oldest people, wandered far away all over the earth, captivity to captivity, multiplying, dying, being born everywhere. He's acutely aware of the history of anti-Semitic oppression and imprisonment, and yet, continued Jewish regeneration. The land that God destroyed, the plains, formerly Sodom and Gomorrah, lay there now. Now it could bear no more. Dead. These plains, he's thinking, are desolate and covered with ash and brimstone. Mr. Bloom imagines. Cheerful thoughts, eh? On a sunny morning. And the old woman coming out of the pub with a nagging bottle of booze intensifies his bleak image. The grey, sunken cunt of the world. Desolation. All these thoughts of the Dead Sea and the surrounding desert triggered by a cloud. And the C word, of course, was part of the reason that Ulysses was so viscerally attacked when it appeared. Isn't that an interesting passage this week? Isn't that so interesting? More next week, and let me just remind you, as I always do, Rejoice, Exploring the World of Ulysses is now an ebook. The first dozen or so of these podcasts transcribed and from ebook sources on the internet, such as Amazon. It costs a mere $3.99, and I shall see you next week. Rejoice, episode 173, Salt and Strong Men. Hello, I'm Frank Delaney. Ulysses Chapter 4, that's where we are. From sunny affability to feelings of desolation. Mr. Bloom's mood has been altered somewhat by a grey cloud crossing the sun as he walks back along Dorset Street in Dublin from the butcher's shop. He's been reading a newspaper advertisement for land opportunities in Palestine, all olives and oranges, and when he looks up, he sees an old and grey woman bent with age, and that intensifies his gloom. Here's the text. Much of it is relatively clear and narrative. Quote, grey horror seared his flesh. Folding the page into his pocket, he turned into Eccles Street, hurrying homeward. Cold oils slid along his veins, chilling his blood, age crusting him with a salt cloak. Well, I am here now. Yes, I'm here now. Morning mouth, bad images, got up wrong side of the bed. Must begin again those Sandoz exercises. On the hands, down. Blotchy, brown brick houses. Number 80 still unlet. Why is that? Valuation's only 28. Towers, Battersby, North, MacArthur. Parlour windows plastered with bills, plasters on a sore eye. To smell the gentle smoke of tea, fume of the pan, sizzling butter. Be near her ample, bed-warmed flesh. Yes, yes. End of quote. Let's take the first three sentences. Grey horror seared his flesh. Folding the page into his pocket, he turned into Eccles Street, hurrying homeward. Cold oils slid along his veins, chilling his blood, age crusting him with a salt cloak. Well, this is Joyce as God, so to speak, the omniscient narrator, one of the oldest narrative techniques there is, superseded possibly by narratives beginning with the pronoun I, as in, I slew the Brontosaurus with one blow. And here Joyce is describing Mr. Bloom's feelings, and to do that, to know that, you have to be God. First, the narrator describes how Mr. Bloom is feeling grey horror searing his flesh. Then the narrator describes for us from his God's eye view Mr. Bloom turning the corner of Dorset Street into his own street, Eccles Street, and folding the newspaper as he walks. And next, we have more of God. The narrator is looking down knowledge of Mr. Bloom, and the cold oils sliding along his veins, chilling his blood. And even a judgment, or is it? It's certainly a comment on how Mr. Bloom is feeling, having seen the old woman, the old hag with a liquor bottle. Time is what's now disturbing Mr. Bloom. Age is crusting him with a salt cloak. Excellent phrase, isn't it? Age crusting him with a salt cloak. I wonder if it's from something is ringing a bell. Is it Dante? Huh. Let me think about it. Or is it Lot's wife and the pillar of salt in the Bible? Because he has been thinking about Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain that God destroyed with fire and brimstone. Was it last week or the week before we had that? But why do I think it's Dante? Hamlet talks about his inky cloak. It won't come. Damn it. What was it? Never mind. Oh, hang on, though. Lot's wife looked back on the destruction, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. Remember, there was an illustration of it in my boyhood catechism. And Mr. Bloom, well, hasn't he just been looking back on the days when he was still a Jew? Huh. Where was I? Yes. Now we leave Joyce's omniscient narration, and we turn again to Mr. Bloom's thoughts, as he thinks, well, I'm here now. Yes, I'm here now. Morning mouth. Bad images. Got up wrong side of the bed. Must begin again those Sandoz exercises. On the hands, down. He's back in his own street. He's had a bad morning taste in his mouth, which is giving him bad pictures in his mind. We all know the phrase to get out on the wrong side of the bed. And he attributes the way he's feeling to not keeping fit. And he thinks of resuming a Keep Fit program named Sandoz Exercises. Now, just for a second, and you probably find this irritating, but I'm going to do it anyway. Fast forward to the chapter named Ithaca, second from last, and on the bookshelf of Mr. Bloom's house there sits, between In the Track of the Sun by Frederick Diodati Thompson, a book we've encountered earlier in this chapter, as Mr. Bloom thinks of exotic places. That book has a yellow cloth cover, by the way. And between that and the book Short but Yet Plain Elements of Geometry, we find this title, Physical Strength and How to Obtain It by Eugene Sandow, bound in red cloth. The correct title, Joyce got it slightly wrong, was Strength and How to Obtain It, but he got the rest right. Sandow is given the credit, S-A-N-D-O-W, by the way. He's given the credit, if that's the right word, for being the world's first bodybuilder. Long before Charles Atlas and his dynamic tension, Sandow was a famous strongman who did strongman stunts in public. He was able to tie a chain around his chest and snap it by expanding his chest. Well, I could do that, if I was strong enough. So Mr. Bloom is going to do press-ups, hands down, as directed by Mr. Sandow. And so, Mr. Bloom is back on Eccles Street. He thinks, blotchy brown brick houses. That's a very good description, by the way. I remember those houses. Number 80 still on let. Why is that? Valuation is only 28. He's wondering why a house across the street from his house, number 7 Eccles Street, the Bloom's address, hasn't yet had a tenant. And that's out of whack. And I'll come to that in a second. And Joyce got something else out of whack here. It's fascinating. So he goes on, he observes all the real estate firms, Towers, Battersbury, North, MacArthur. North is still in business, if it's the same firm. Battersby's used to be. I remember them very well. I tried to buy a house through them once. They were run by a very nice man named Dennis Peart. I think they're gone now, as are MacArthur's and Towers. And there's Bloom looking at the parlour windows on number 80 Eccles Street, plastered with bills of these real estate companies, and thinking, plasters on a sore eye. In other words, a sight for sore eyes. Well, it's a sight that makes your eyes sore. Because a sight for sore eyes is the opposite, isn't it? It's a sight that makes your eyes look good. And a house plastered with realtors' bills doesn't look good. Now, this is what's so interesting. This is the out-of-whack thing. I'm using, principally nowadays, Hans Walter Gabler's revised edition of Ulysses, and rightly so for accuracy's sake, when all is said and done, no matter how much fun the earlier editions are. But in the manuscript, that's the Joyce manuscript, the handwritten version, that's at the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia, Joyce has number 7 Eccles Street plastered with realtors' notices. Number 80 was actually occupied in 1904 by a man named Tim McKeown. And the valuations are wrong too, according to Dublin City records. The houses are mixed up in Joyce's text, and he later returns to the mistakes. So he was, or became aware of that at least. My guess is, And it's very clear in the manuscript, by the way, that it's number 7. My guess is that Joyce, when he was farther into the novel, changed his mind about the address of the Bloom household and forgot to make the earlier adjustments. In a work as big and teeming as this, 260,000 words, give or take a few thousand, easy to get stuff wrong. And remember, number 7 Eccles Street is the house he chose because that's the house of the aunt of his friend J.F. Byrne, where Byrne assured him one night that no, Nora had not been unfaithful to him with some of the other young bucks who claimed she had. So now Mr. Bloom is home and pleased to be so, to smell the gentle smoke of tea, fume of the pan, sizzling butter, be near her ample bed-warmed flesh. Yes, yes. Interesting pre-echo here of the last words in Ulysses, when Molly gives vent to her own feelings during an orgasm, and the last word in the book is famously, yes. There's a gentle echo here, too, of the Odyssey Book 1, when Athena is describing how Odysseus would love once more. Here's the quote from the Butler translation. Where is it? Hold on. It's page 2 in my Oxford paperback. Here it is. To see the smoke of his own chimneys. So, lovely description in general of what Mr. Bloom sees as the comforts of home, corresponding with Odysseus' comforts of home. And Mr. Bloom, of course, has Molly's ample bed-warmed flesh. And that, actually, to which he's looking forward, becomes terribly poignant as the story of their marriage unfolds, because, as we shall discover to our anguish, the bed-warmed flesh of Molly Bloom warms others in their bed when Mr. Bloom's not there. Yes, yes. Well, that's it for this week. Let me remind you, Joyce, Exploring the World of Ulysses is now an e-book, the first dozen or so of these podcasts transcribed. At $3.99, and I'm preparing the next ebook, which will be much longer. Join me again here next week. Rejoice, episode 174, Morning Sadness. Hello, I'm Frank Delaney. Mr. Leopold Bloom is almost home again from the butcher's. It's Thursday morning, the 16th of June, 1904. That's why we call it Bloom's Day. He has hoped to see a servant girl with ample hips, she's from a neighbour's house, walking home before him, but that didn't happen. His sunny mood changed because of A, a grey cloud overhead, and B, an old woman clutching a liquor bottle as she leaves a pub. By now, he's almost home, and he's looking forward to breakfast, and enjoying the thoughts of his warm, sleepy wife in her bed. Here's some text. Quick, warm sunlight came running from Berkeley Road, swiftly in slim sandals along the brightening footpath. She runs to meet me, a girl with gold hair in the wind. 2 letters and a card lay on the hall floor. He stooped and gathered them. Mrs. Marion Bloom. His quickened heart slowed at once. Bold hand. Mrs. Marion. Poldy? Entering the bedroom, he half closed his eyes and walked through warm yellow twilight towards her tousled head. Who were the letters for? He looked at them. Mullingar, Millie. A letter for me from Millie, he said carefully, and a card to you, and a letter for you. End of text. Nothing in Ulysses is as simple as it seems. Let's deal with the simple part of the first sentence. Quick, warm sunlight came running from Berkeley Road. Berkeley Road is just north of where Bloom is crossing Eccles Street to his own home. And the sun is racing toward him because the grey cloud, travelling north ever since Stephen Dedalus saw it earlier on the far, far side of the city, no longer masks it, no longer blocks the light. The footpath, the sidewalk, the pavement is getting brighter as the sunlight spreads fast along it. But how about the slim sandals? More than a little poetic flight of fancy on the part of 38-year-old Mr. Bloom? Yes, and a literary device on the part of Mr. Joyce, who was, by the way, 16 years younger than Mr. Bloom. Let me quote to you from Book 5 of the Odyssey, Samuel Butler's translation. Mercury, guide and guardian, slayer of Argus, did as he was told. Forthwith he bound on his glittering golden sandals, with which he could fly like the wind over land and sea. He took the wand with which he seals men's eyes in sleep, or wakes them, just as he pleases, and flew, holding it in his hand over Pieria. Then he swooped down through the firmament till he reached the level of the sea, whose waves he skimmed like a cormorant that flies fishing every hole and corner of the ocean and drenching its thick plumage in the spray. He flew and flew over many a weary wave, but when at last he got to the island which was his journey's end, he left the sea and went on by land till he came to the cave where the nymph Calypso lived. Forgive the digression of the long quote. Here's my excuse. It's, in general, madness and inaccurate to try and pin every reference in Ulysses to Homer's Odyssey, but when they touch here and there, it's always a delight to me to observe the contact. The touching point here, Joyce's reference to the golden sandals of the messenger of the gods, Hermes in Greek, Mercury to the Romans, and remember what he eventually named this chapter? Calypso. Watch out for another gentle, almost vague fizz of contact in a moment, as the wires of Homer and Joyce touch. That first sentence, quick, warm sunlight came running from Berkeley Road swiftly in slim sandals along the brightening footpath. That's Joyce's narration. Here are Mr. Bloom's thoughts. She runs to meet me, a girl with gold hair on the wind. He's thinking fondly of his daughter Millie. And now, keep listening. Here's the text again. Mr. Bloom enters his hallway. 2 letters and a card lay on the hall floor. He stooped and gathered them. Mrs. Marion Bloom. His quickened heart slowed at once. Bold hand. Mrs. Marion. And then comes the cry from upstairs. Poldy! First 3 sentences absolutely clear. The postman, the modern Mercury, if you like, has shoved 2 letters and a postcard through the mail slot on the front door, and there they lie on the hall floor. Mr. Bloom bends down and picks them up, and, more or less, gulps. One of the letters, in bold handwriting, is addressed to his wife, Mrs. Marion Bloom. His quickened heart slowed at once. Bold hand. Mrs. Marion. What's the point here? Why am I labouring it? It's very important. The addressing of the letter is offensive. It should have been Mrs. Leopold Bloom. Is it a calculated insult to Mr. Bloom? Well, perhaps, because it's from someone he wishes his wife would never hear from. Be patient. This entire deconstruction is an exercise in patience for me as well as for you. Not only that, his wife, in bed, upstairs, half awake and drowsy in the sunlit morning, has heard the postman's hand put something through the slot in the door, and has heard the fall of mail to the hallway floor. And she calls out, Poldy, short for Leopold. Mr. Bloom, in answer, climbs the stairs, letters in hand. Entering the bedroom, he half closed his eyes and walked through warm yellow twilight towards her tousled head. Goodness, it's almost thriller writing along here. His wife is waking up, and she asks, Who are the letters for? Mr. Bloom scrutinizes the letters in his hand, one in particular, and he's glad to see it. Mullingar, Millie. He tells his wife, A letter for me from Millie, he said carefully, and a card to you, and a letter for you. And now begins the first sad, slow notes of the love theme that runs through Ulysses like a long fugue. The clue, as I hinted, is in the disrespect of the letter's addressing. Marion Bloom has a lover, and Mr. Bloom knows it. We will follow this story throughout Ulysses in multiple and diverse ways, and if you're thinking that it's perhaps unusual for a novel with such serious literary intent to have content not too far removed from the work of a romantic novel, you'll be surprised. The lover theme in Joyce's hands has profound usefulness. It tells us, at a snap, something about Molly Bloom. It tells repeatedly of her husband's character. It permits some beautiful writing. It exemplifies here and there how Joyce used the casual comings and goings of the people of Dublin that day to build his unique work of art. Watch out, as you do this with me over the years, watch out how the people in this love triangle crisscross each other's paths that day, and how other people crisscross them. Be alert to Joyce's very large gift of compassionate understanding and his capacity to render it in writing. And watch, too, for its connection to Homer's Ulysses, as ever, more tangential than direct. Who are the letters for? He looked at them. Mullingar, Millie. A letter for me, for Millie, he said carefully. And a card to you. And a letter for you. Such a slight beginning to such a heart-hurting matter. More on this next week. And let me remind you, I've been putting together ebook transcripts of these podcasts. Rejoice! Exploring the World of Ulysses is the first of them, the opening dozen or so of these podcasts transcribed. And it costs from ebook sources such as Amazon or Kobo or Barnes & Noble a mere $3.99 more next week. Rejoice, episode 175, Cats and Kosher. Hello, I'm Frank Delaney. Mr. Bloom has come back home from the butcher, found 3 pieces of mail on the doormat, is delivering 2 of them to his wife. He's now in their bedroom on the morning of Thursday, the 16th of June, 1904, and here's the next piece of text. He laid her card and letter on the twill bedspread near the curve of her knees. Do you want the blind up? Letting the blind up by gentle tugs halfway, his backward eye saw her glance at the letter and tuck it under her pillow. That do? He asked, turning. She was reading the card, propped on her elbow. She got the things, she said. He waited till she had laid the card aside and curled herself back slowly, with a snug sigh. Hurry up with that tea, she said. I'm parched. The kettle is boiling, he said. But he delayed to clear the chair. Her striped petticoat, tossed soiled linen, and lifted all in an armful onto the foot of the bed. As he went down the kitchen stairs, she called, Poldy? What? Scald the teapot. On the boil, sure enough. A plume of steam from the spout. He scalded and rinsed out the teapot, and put in 4 full spoons of tea, tilting the kettle then to let the water flow in. Having set it to draw, he took off the kettle, crushed the pan flat on the live coals, and watched the lump of butter slide and melt. While he unwrapped the kidney, the cat mewed hungrily against him. Give her too much meat, she won't mouse. Say they won't eat pork. Kosher. Here. He let the blood-smeared paper fall to her, and dropped the kidney amid the sizzling butter sauce. Pepper. He sprinkled it through his fingers, ringwise, from the chipped egg cup. Well now, and with that descriptive piece of prose, James Joyce set out with full clarity his modernist, his naturalizing stall in Ulysses. We were, he had decided, going to read a novel in which the most mundane of human life was grist to the literary mill. That kind of down and dirty attitude, largely due to Joyce's influence, spread across the early 20th century and the mid-20th century in all sorts of ways. Take a tangential example, Willem de Kooning, even painted with ordinary builder's paint. Let's go through that text. First sentence. He laid her card and letter on the twill bedspread near the curve of her knees. It's pretty clear, isn't it? Followed by Mr. Bloom's question, do you want the blind up? Molly is stirring awake slowly, and she's still under the bedding. Light is in the room, but not yet streaming, so this good and kind husband places the mail within reach and shows considerateness about the incoming light. Now, watch what happens next, because it's part of the plot. I talked about this last week. I may use the word loosely with regard to Ulysses, but don't you believe anyone who tells you there's no story in this novel. There is. Watch this. Letting the blind up by gentle tugs halfway, his backward eye saw her glance at the letter and tuck it under her pillow. You see, he's thoughtful enough to control the intake of sunlight so that his recumbent wife isn't dazzled all at once, but he's keeping an eye on her, letting the blind up by gentle tugs halfway. And then he sees that she does something furtive. His backward eye saw her glance at the letter and tuck it under her pillow. She doesn't want to open the letter in front of him. We know from previous weeks that the letter is from a gentleman named Boylan. Some would argue that he's no gentleman. Hugh Boylan, Blazes Boylan, a concert impresario. But he has more than a professional interest in Mrs. Bloom, and that is breaking chips off the edge of Mr. Bloom's heart. Later in the novel, and heartbreakingly so, I've said this before, we will see how the paths of Mr. Bloom and Blazes Boylan cross, and Mr. Bloom will know where Mr. Boylan has just been, so to speak. But for now, Mr. Bloom ignores his wife's furtiveness and checks that everything is as she wants it. That do? He asked, turning. This is a thoughtful and good husband. Well, up to a point, as we shall see in the next chapter. He is, in his defence, though, he's sorely tried by his wife's, shall we call it, flamboyance, and, of course, by their shared history of family tragedy. So, he continues with his tiny tasks of consideration. I'm fascinated that Joyce saw such ordinary gentleness as fit material for great literature. It caused a terrific stir at the time. Is he really writing this kind of domestic detail? Well, yes, he is. And why not? Look at Vermeer. So, next, he writes. She was reading the card, propped on her elbow. She got the things, she said. He waited till she had laid the card aside and curled herself back slowly with a snug sigh. Hurry up with that tea, she said. I'm parched. The kettle is boiling, he said. But he delayed to clear the chair, her striped petticoat, tossed soiled linen, and lifted all in an armful onto the foot of the bed. And to think of today's arguments as to who should put out the garbage, well, not in our house. The principal values of what I've just read now are the accuracy of the description, Joyce's delight in the ordinariness of these little kind actions and events, and how they characterize both Leopold Bloom and his somewhat uncaring wife. They've had a card from their daughter Millie, each of them. Well, she's had a card, he's had a letter. Millie works in a photographer's shop down in Mullingar, and Millie is acknowledging the gifts they sent for her birthday. That's a pretty ordinary, straightforward domestic scene. But that, in 1922, when Ulysses came out, ho boy, did anyone think it was worth writing? Joyce did, and that's what made the difference. Next, as he went down the kitchen stairs, she called, Poldy! What? He calls back up. Scald the teapot. And here we get a hint of the control of Molly Bloom. Her husband knows that you must make the teapot scalding hot before you put in the tea, so why does she need to tell him? She doesn't. She's bossy. Here's the next passage. I'll reread it all, slowly, and it needs very little analysis. It's nothing more and nothing less than a typical kitchen scene at that level of society in that city at that time, and replicated in many other cities across the world. As I've said before, with Joyce, in the particular, is the universal. Here's the scene again. On the boil, sure enough, a plume of steam from the spout, and there you're drifting from Mr. Bloom's thought into Joyce's description. which continues, he scalded and rinsed out the teapot and put in 4 full spoons of tea, tilting the kettle then to let the water flow in, pouring the kettle towards the teapot. Having set it to draw, he took off the kettle, crushed the pan flat on the live coals, and watched the lump of butter slide and melt. While he unwrapped the kidney, the cat mewed hungrily against him. Give her too much meat, she won't mouse. Say they won't eat pork. Kosher. Here, he let the blood-smeared paper fall to her and dropped the kidney amid the sizzling butter sauce. Pepper. He sprinkled it through his fingers ringwise from the chipped egg cup. Well, you can see it, can't you? Down to the detail that they keep the pepper for seasoning in an egg cup that is no longer used on the table because the china has a chip in it. By the way, he first in his manuscript had the kettle boiling instead of on the boil. And he spreads the pepper in a circle, ringwise, in a little circle. And the sweet joke about the kosher cat, that they won't eat meat, they won't eat pork, and the piece of folklore that cats won't chase mice if you feed them meat, well, untrue in my experience. But that's Mr. Joyce. Yet again. More next week. Don't forget, Read Joyce Exploring the World of Ulysses is now an ebook, the first dozen or so of these podcasts transcribed, and it costs from ebook sources on the internet a mere $3.99.